And welcome to the Doomloop Dispatch, the show covering the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm your host, Kevin L. Jones, and I'm here to make you hate rich nerds. Well, not really. That's not the goal, but that's usually the result of listening to this show. So sorry if you're a nice rich nerd who doesn't deserve the hate. Hashtag not all nerds. For today's episode, I'll be talking to playwright and former Oakland mayoral candidate Kat Brooks. Brooks is the founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project, which assists communities with alleviating the damage done by aggressive policing. We discuss all the developments and narratives going on about crime in Oakland, focusing on the lies being pushed by the right-wing moderates and the media. She's been fighting injustice for a while now and has a ton of insight, so look forward to the interview. Now for the headlines. Let's start with the big news out of San Francisco over the weekend. Supervisor Aaron Peskin is running for mayor. And because Peskin is seen as an enemy to the spoiled techies on the right, there's already an uproar. After the news broke, it felt like every CEO with a Twitter account posted something negative about him, blaming Peskin for all of San Francisco's woes. Gary Tan even tweeted that Peskin was a selfish NIMBY boomer, and if he won, San Francisco would turn into something worse than the bombed-out husk of apocalyptic Detroit at its worst. Which is just really terrible writing, Gary. Anyways, the media also jumped in, running stories that weren't directly critical, but were just asking questions like, do Chinatown residents who live in his district support Peskin's bid for mayor? The answer is yes, by the way. They support him. He received almost 70% of their vote last election. There's even a small, and I mean small, protest at his announcement. The protesters said terrible things, like one with a bullhorn said, "If you are here and you are not white, bow down to your master, Aaron Peskin," which is just nasty. There was another protest at an event with District 1 Supervisor Connie Chan, and both protests had known quote-unquote moderate activists leading them. For example, at the head of the protest against Chan was Connor Johnston, former lackey to Mayor Breed, who turned to selling weed. He's the guy that kept calling Chan racist because she supposedly called Breed lazy. Leading Peskin's protest was Mark Farrell's campaign manager, Jade 2, who used to be the community program leader for Together SF, a billionaire-funded group in the same mold as Gary Tan's Grow SF. So just in case you thought these protests were organic, they were not. Even a political observer told Tim Redman of the blog 48 Hills that the Peskin protest was a collection of paid hacks. In other news, San Francisco's Supervisor Dean Preston pissed off the centrists. For breathing? No, but usually that's enough. No, Preston made the internet mad because he wants to keep grocery stores in San Francisco. He recently resurrected the Neighborhood Grocery Protection Act, a law originally passed by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1984, but was vetoed by then Mayor Dianne Feinstein because it held businesses accountable. The whole point of the law is to give some power to the neighborhoods where the stores open in order to prevent food deserts, aka places where you can't get healthy food. If passed, the law creates a new process for a grocery store to close. The grocer has to give a 6-month notice that it's closing and meet with community members to look into solutions, including finding possible replacements. Preston is right to push for a bill like this. He did it after Safeway announced it planned to close its store in San Francisco's Fillmore district, which is going to create a food desert there. Food deserts are a serious issue. If a neighborhood doesn't have a grocery store, that means healthy food like fruits and vegetables becomes scarce. This affects everyone living there, from the children to the seniors. That's why there was a huge uproar in the neighborhood, and the store agreed to stay open until next year. So what did the great centrist minds of San Francisco's internet think about the whole situation? Well, they say things like, Preston is an asshat. Also, people have no idea how they can enforce the law, even though it's posted online and you can look it up. Most notably, the slur I keep seeing Preston called over and over again is commie. Let's be clear, big folks in the YIMBY movement like Max Dubler hate this thing because it tells a business what to do. That's it. They attacked the act by saying the business would stay open if there wasn't crime. But we already know the whole retail crime narrative is a myth, and it definitely doesn't apply in this case. It's closing because Safeway owns the property in that neighborhood and plans to sell it to a developer. Personally, I'm enjoying this because in moments like these, Yimbys show their whole asses. They pretend to be progressive, talking about how density is better for the working class and the environment. But you know what's best for a community? Access to food. People have to eat, and it should be healthy foods. Yimbys refuse to care about the communities they want to build in unless those issues they face affect curb appeal. So hopefully this bill is passed and Yimbys lose their mind. Now, one story I really hope everyone is following here is the rent control battle in Concord. The city council there passed a rent control measure back in February, but then someone submitted a petition for another rent control measure, and if it collects enough signatures, it will bring the rent control measure to the November ballot. So thereby stopping the city council's measure. It's a weird situation. I mean, I don't even know why one cancels out the other. The bill the council passed isn't even that tough. A ton of properties are excluded, like condos and single family homes, and it only applies to apartments built before 1995. But what it does do is cap annual rent increases to 3% or 60% of the consumer price index, whichever is lower. And that's a good thing. The city needs these tenant protections. According to KPIX, rents went up 62% over the past decade, and local residents are hitting the streets demanding this rent control. So I'm working to interview someone from the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy about the rent control protections because they're very much involved. So look forward to that. Hopefully it's next week. Now, let's talk about Oakland. Crime is decreasing there, especially murders. Last week, there were zero, and burglaries are down as well, though robberies are up. So, why is there a doom loop narrative in Oakland? And what is it really like there? I talked with Kat Brooks about the narrative, the push for more police there, and what Oakland actually needs. Here's that interview. All righty, Doom Loop listeners, we are speaking with Kat Brooks, who is a playwright, an artivist, a former Oakland mayoral candidate, and the founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project. Now, first, I want to start with the Anti-Terror Police Terror Project. How did you start this group?
Okay, let's try to do the condensed answer to this. So, folks that are of a certain age and have been here a while will remember, will never forget January 1st, 2009, when Oscar Grant was murdered on the Fruitvale BART platform by then BART police officer Johannes Meserly. Folks will also remember that the streets organically exploded, right? And I say that every time I talk about this because a lot of nonprofits since then have tried to claim ownership over that movement. And the truth is that that was a movement of the people. And at that time, I was working with a group of Black organizers with the Black August Organizing Committee, and we pivoted to turn our attention to the movement for justice for Oscar Grant, which we then became deeply embedded in. During that time, we formed an organization called Onyx, and our intention was for that to be a Black liberation organization. And we were going to work on a bunch of stuff, right? We did political education, and we did our first Feed the Peoples and culture, like all the stuff. But the state kept killing us. And then so, building on the momentum from the Oscar Grant movement, we were protesting both murders by the Oakland Police Department, which at that time was the most murderous police department in the country, murders by the state and other places of the country, which of course rolled into Occupy, which looks very different here in Oakland than it did in other places in the country. But my point is, for weeks, months, years on end, more often than not, we were in the streets as Oaklanders and surrounding Bay Area cities by the thousands, right? And so at one point, Asantwa Boykin, who's one of the other co-founders of APTP, said to me, what are we doing? Like, I feel like we're chasing dead black bodies. And she was right, because as organizers, we understand that like reactions are great. Protest is great. All that stuff matters, right? For a bunch of different reasons. But if you're not funneling that energy into sustained movement, if you're not funneling that energy into building a base that can leverage power to actually change material conditions, then it's political masturbation.
Mhm.
Um, and so APTP was born to be still hold the reactionary, right? A lot of our work is with families. A lot of our work is dealing with trauma of our communities, but also to be visionary, asking ourselves the question: why have we accepted the paradigm that we just have to live with state violence? Like this is just a foregone conclusion. We don't have any choice, and our only option is to respond or sue the state. Why are we only moving when the state moves? Why are we only angry when they kill us when we know that they terrorize us in all these other ways every day of the week, every month of the year? So that's why APTP was born, with a really tiny mission. We want to eradicate state terror in communities of color. And we've been about that business ever since. And so we were formed in 2009. So we're right behind Oscar Grant and born out of the Oscar Grant movement and
Mhm.
work in deep partnership with his family. So 15 years later, here we are.
Yeah. I actually want to take a second to talk about Oscar Grant because I'm actually the guy that posted the video on KTVU. And so it was a real moment of waking up for me because it was the first time that I just saw blatant police brutality here in the Bay Area like that, where like why, even if he wants to just tase him, why is he doing that? The guy's on the ground. And then also too, when I saw the reaction, because at the time I'd been working in the news a lot, and so for a long time, and so I was kind of used to just, oh, please shoot another guy, please shoot another guy. And I never, it was such a real turning point because of the reaction was so huge. Like out of nowhere, like I post a video going like, "Oh, this is fucked up. Let's see what happens." And it was like 1 million views, within hours, which was a lot for the station.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I guess I want to ask about that too, because it's just like, I mean, had you known about kind of similar situations before then, and this was kind of just the final straw, or what was it about Oscar Grant's murder that made you want to jump up and really get more involved?
Sure. So I've been an organizer my entire adult life. Other than acting, I've never done anything else but organize. I come from an activist family. My mom was on the front lines of the movement to end domestic violence in Nevada, as well as we did a lot of solidarity with Indigenous people organizing because Nevada has a test site. Um, and I grew up watching my mother get arrested, which is funny because she would get really mad at me years later when I was getting arrested. But I was at home visiting, for the holidays, and at that time my daughter was 2, almost 3, and we had driven home, and we lived when people could still afford to live off of 14th and Alice Street. And right there at that intersection, a brother waved me down, and he was like, "Where's that rally?" Um, And I was like, "What rally?" And he was like, "For that brother that they killed." Now, just one state over, right? I nothing, had heard nothing, and wasn't on social media the way that we are now, right? Like you checked and like it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. So anyway, I pulled into what used to be a parking lot that I believe is now expensive condominiums, and and got my toddler out of the car and went upstairs and watched that video, and it's still. And it wasn't, so I lost my father to the penitentiary for 6 years. I grew up watching the police kick my dad's butt. I grew up, the first time I was ever threatened with rape was by law enforcement. You can't do black brown organizing and not deal with issues of police terror. When I was in LA, I remember this particular case around a 14-year-old kid who couldn't even barely see over the dashboard of the car he'd stolen that they put like 60 bullets inside of. Um, and so when I talk about this, though, that holding my daughter and watching that, it was like something in me. I call it my enough moment, right? Like something shifted, and I didn't really know what that was. I just knew that the way that I had to do something. Like I said, we were already working with the Black August Organizing Committee, so I was already engaged in, pushing back against the carceral state, and had worked on several of these cases before. I had a regular nonprofit job at the time, and then I started at night volunteering with the first coalition that did form, which was the Coalition Against Police Executions. For Oakland, though, when I talk about this particular moment, because it actually, I have these conversations with families a lot, and I've worked with hundreds at this point. There'll be a family in, say, Riverside who loses their loved one in a really brutal way, and no one ever knows about it. But then you've got like what happened to George Floyd, and the whole globe explodes. And people ask the question why, and it's a bunch of reasons, but it's always dictated by political conditions. What are the political conditions of the time, right? How many times have cops killed people in recent history in that particular area? What are the economic conditions, at the time? And so for here in Oakland, right? So first of all, to your point, that many views, advent of social media, people were communicating a different way. Because it was New Year's Eve, there were lots of people out who got it on their phones that otherwise would not have been on that platform, were it not New Year's, the wee hours of the morning of New Year's Day. The third thing is remembering, like I said at the beginning, like at that time, the Oakland Police Department was one of the most murderous police departments in Northern California. It mattered not that this was a BART police officer, right? Like the community did not distinguish, right? It's like a cop is a cop is a cop. We have to also remember that we were in the middle of a recession. So very similar to some of the conditions that we're dealing with now, right? Where the housing insecure, homeless, the hungry, starving, people were losing jobs. They were losing their homes that had been in families for generations. And so there was already, right, this tension on the street. And so Oscar's murder was just the match to a pool of gasoline that had just been laying around. And especially when you combine that also with Oakland's history of organizing and activism. This was really where the most structured movement against state terror was born, right? And that was the advent of the Black Panther Party. And we have sort of kept up that legacy here. And the murder, Oscar's murder, and then the subsequent protests, which then did funnel into, an interesting air quotes organized movement, because there were lots of us across political spectrums that were working together through a lot of struggle, principled struggle, to get to an outcome. But it did absolutely kick off this iteration of the movement to end state violence. No justice for Oscar Grant, no Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Period.
Wow. Yeah, totally. It totally deserves the credit. I
Yep.
love that. I totally believe that. Now, let's get into some updated stuff. Oakland's Privacy Advisory Commission recommended this to stop Shotspotter, the program that basically tells police there's been shots over here, and they rush to it thinking they're going to catch something. But it's also known to have been super faulty, lots of false calls and stuff. So do you see this as a victory for Oakland?
I do see it as a victory for Oakland, particularly. Well, yeah, I was going to say too, like sometimes it tells cops that shots have been fired. Sometimes it tells cops that a bottle breaking was a gunfire, or firecrackers were gunfire, or right. And we have to remember that every time police dispatch, right, that those are dollars that we are spending. I think I also want to put this in a national context. So we are seeing cities all over the country, most recently in Chicago, not renewing their Shotspotter contracts because they are very costly and they are very ineffective. And so, yes, it's a win for Oakland in terms of I'm going to say this, it's a partial win for Oakland. It's a partial win for Oakland because those are lots of dollars that we're going to save by not renewing that contract. But if the city just takes those dollars and invests it into another arm of the carceral state, then no, that is not a win for Oakland. If they take those dollars and give it to the DVP, right, or programs that are actually doing violence interruption or non-carceral response to community crisis, then it's a win for Oakland. So we shall see. I was happy though to see, um, the Privacy Commission is super important. I'm really supportive of their work and the work, particularly of Brian Hofer. And I just feel like they have just sort of been spit on over the last couple of months with the moves by, the governor and our mayor. with, like, how do you just bypass the privacy commission and just decide you just go implement hundreds of cameras all throughout the flatlands? Like, that's literally why the privacy commission exists.
Mhm.
Literally.
Mhm.
More failed technology, more technology that misidentifies people, it ends up in unwarranted, unnecessary, violent encounters with law enforcement. Millions of dollars that we could be spent on prevention, instead of, response. And response is not going to do anything to impact our community. So
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't prevent the crime, it's just a response, and
doesn't even help solve the crime most of the time. They're
mhm.
just there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, making everyone uncomfortable. And then that also too, the other aspect of that is Flock and their automatic license plate readers and cameras being set up, and that's actually being pitched to communities, to neighborhood homeowner associations, and so is it's almost like even though we're getting rid of ShotSpotter, there's like it's being replaced basically by something that can be just as damaging as well as a violation of our privacy.
Yeah, and when in this really interesting moment, right, where people are willing to sell their souls for a false sense of safety. And I say false sense, and I steal this from Andrea Ritchie. We were in a meeting once, and she said, "We're literally on a rock that is hurtling its way through space. How are you ever going to feel safe?" And she was being flippant, but like for real. We are back in a time, reminiscent of the 80s and 90s, where the government, the state created a particular set of conditions and then told us that the violence of the state was the only way that we were going to resolve those conditions. And in the 90s, Black folks were clamoring for the three strikes law. We were clamoring for the 1994 crime bill because we were promised that if we funneled thousands of our brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, grannies, children into American jails and prisons, our communities would be safer. Well, guess what? They were less safe, in part because we ripped apart one of the biggest keys to safe communities, which is intact families. Um, and right, we still haven't recovered from that. Um, and we're doing it again. The state has created a set of conditions, um, by not responding, not getting in front of the conditions that we knew the economic pandemic would bring. They capitalized on those conditions to blame the defund movement that we also gave birth to here, that never happened, by the way,
Yeah,
for rising crime.
yeah.
And it was like two birds, one basket for them, right? And so now we've got folks clamoring to. To criminalize, incarcerate by any means necessary, forget people's privacy rights, forget people's First Amendment rights, forget people's human and civil rights, right? We just want to feel safe.
Hmm.
We've been here before. We've done this before. It's never worked. It's not going to work this time. My concern is, um, with all this influx of surveillance and militarized law enforcement, and that's exactly what I consider the CHP, seventh most deadly law enforcement agency in the country. Who's going to suffer for how long, only to end up with the same results? And then who do we get to hold accountable for that?
Hmm.
Gavin will
Hmm.
be gone. He will be running for president, right? Because
Yep.
that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Oakland is a black eye on his presidential campaign. That is why he is here.
Hmm. Hmm.
He will be gone, um, and we'll still be here with the conditions that are impacting all of us, quite frankly.
Yeah, but it also seems too, not just the politicians looking to save their butts are a part of this, but it also seems that there's a lot of investment from real estate speculators. It seems like this is also much more about supporting cops to protect property. Are you seeing that as well? I mean, that's what seems to be least funding the recall of Pamela Price, our district attorney.
Yeah, I mean, and they're the same people. Let's be really clear. There are parts of that crew that are absolutely the same people that funded and pushed through the recall of former SF District Attorney Chesa Boudin. We have to think about this in layers, right? To think about it, like who benefits directly on the ground from this kind of narrative, who's being utilized as the face of this kind of narrative, benefits fiscally from this narrative, who benefits politically from this narrative. And by politically, I'm talking both locally and nationally, right? So the folks that are saying that this is about public safety consist of some folks that used to sit on the city council when things still looked like this, had their chance to do something about it and didn't. Folks that were tied very intimately into the Schaaf Brown neoliberal establishment and administration, and enjoyed the proximity to power, right, and the benefits that came with that. So there's that, and they're mad because this was not supposed to happen, right? That they were supposed to continue this legacy and remain in power, and that's everything from the former elected officials to some of these community groups, right? Um, and then we have to also put this in the context of the 2024 national presidential elections and understand that the right has been building this movement to impact local elections as a way to build up a base as we barrel towards the 2024 elections for years now. It really started with local school board races, is where we really started to see it first pop up. We also saw that in San Francisco, right? What happened there? And now they've expanded to city council, where there are progressive left-leaning district attorneys, where there are left-leaning mayors. I'm taking back the word progressive. You don't just get to have that word anymore unless you really are progressive.
I agree.
Well, I'll call you left-leaning.
Yeah.
But you're seeing this all over the country, right? I don't know if we're going to say that dude's name. I try not to, but there are one of him almost in every major city across the country. And I'm not an investigative journalist. I'm just a big mouth person that somebody had the bad sense to give a radio show to. But I really want an investigative journalist to connect these dots, to do the FOIAs, right? Just like it was a coordinated national effort to kick defund in the teeth, there was a national coordinated effort to pull the country to the right.
Yes, and yeah, the defund thing too is just so important. Nothing was defunded, and yet everyone on the right acts like it was defunded. Now the issue is, and now especially what the Oakland Public Safety Commission says, there's a shortage of police officers in Oakland. But I've been covering Oakland for over a decade, and there's always been a police shortage, and I don't even know how it will even make a difference because stats show that they don't prevent crime. I mean, what do you think is the point? Why do you think they keep pushing that narrative?
I think that that's a multi-layered answer too, right? So I think it depends on who's spewing the narrative. I think that there are folks that look like me, in our communities that, just like in all communities, from the time we were in the womb, have been told the lie that cops are what keep us safe. I think that that creates a particular type of cognitive dissonance for Black folks because, you go to school and the cop comes and puts the sticker on your thing, and I'm your friend. And then as you make your way home from school, right, you see the cop hemming up your neighbor, your auntie, kicking in your dad's teeth, right, pulling people out of your home. And it's also why large swaths of Black people never call the police, no matter what is in front of them, because we know you make it worse, not better. And yet, right, we're told that the only way we can be safe is by calling these folks. I think for folks, and I don't believe policing works for anybody, not even white people, but it works for white people the best. And they too, right, have been told this lie over and over and over again that cops are safety. If you look at the propaganda that we are bombarded with, from television shows to movies to billboards to magazine to the way mainstream media is framed, I mean, it's just like we're literally indoctrinated. And then you've got folks that are spewing it because they have a vested interest in protecting the status quo. Let's take police associations. They are not unions. Cops are not labor. Police associations. Their whole job is to preserve the status quo, to protect those benefits, protect those pensions, protect those unfunded liabilities. And they do that through protecting the bad actions of law enforcement. You've got the state, right? And then the federal government, who are very interested in maintaining the status quo. And that's actually why cops exist. They are the front line between the people and the state to ensure that we don't get too out of hand. And so it's layered, and it depends on who you're talking to and who you ask. I would say the latter group of folks that I've been talking about, they know good and goddamn well that police are not going to make it any better. They know that. They're clear. They have the data. They just don't give a shit.
Totally. Or they want their votes and something.
Their campaign dollars.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, especially it was the police unions got together to fund the recall against Boudin. Yeah. Especially, you could make the case that they were even selling fentanyl to fund it, at least in San Jose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So stats actually are showing that crime is down. Murders are completely down. Burglaries are down. Robberies
Way
are
down.
up,
Yeah.
but burglaries are down too. So these are like the big crime issues, and they're all down. So why does Oakland still get this doom loop narrative?
Well, I do want to say, right, like we can't not talk about homicides because that does matter. But so yesterday the CHP released their numbers. I think I have it easily accessible. And if you look at the categories that they covered, right, they talked about carjackings, they talked about stolen cars, they talked about DUIs. I think they recovered 417 stolen cars, 31 guns. Then they don't really tell you how many carjackings, because there's not that many, or DUIs, because again, not that many. And then I think it was like 100 and something arrests, right? And folks were like, well, what do you think? And I think a couple things. First of all, automobile, to your point, automobile thefts were already trending down before CHP got here. Second of all, arrests do not mean that all those people were guilty. Third of all, driving around and having license plate tick off while you're recovering stolen cars is not actually police work. Fourth of all, these are all things that the Oakland Police Department should have been doing if they had not been engaged in blue flu for the last 4 years. And so now we're paying their salary and CHP's salary. And fifth of all, right, they're not addressing, because they can't, the thing that Oaklanders are really concerned about. And that is like when my daughter is home from college and she's out for the night, and I inhale when she walks out the door and I don't exhale until she comes home. And more cops on the street is not going to make me breathe any easier. That actually is going to make me hold my breath harder, longer, and tighter, right? Because she's just as in danger from them as she would be from someone who's learned to express their trauma through violence. Again, I think that there are people that are building a political agenda off of the fear, pain, and trauma of Black and brown and poor people inside of the city of Oakland. I think this is a strategy that's playing out in various cities across the country. I think that there are some folks that are being paid. Well, I know for a fact that there are some folks that are being paid by special interests to go create these doom loops. And I think the only thing that sometimes still surprises me about it is the vitriol, like the how okay these folks are with violence, with threats of violence, with racialized attacks, with misogyny. This gang, I mean, for all their talk about like interrupting gang activities, this gang like mob like, not even gang like, this mob like behavior, the absolute lack of anything that's based in reality. Like, lots of people disagree with me politically. That's fine, but disagree with me on shit that's actually true. Like you know, you talk about me up right. If I cared about people talking about me, I would have disappeared a long time ago. But let's like, but like when I see this stuff, and not just about me, that's put out about, you know, anybody that's sort of on their radar, and none of it is like even based on like, what's the latest? Oh, Carol Fife and Cat Brooks and Shang Tao, I believe, like we all got together and created a plan to destroy Oakland. Like that was the point, was to destroy Oakland. First of all, me and Shang ain't even on the same political page. But it's absurd. And then you see people like latch onto this stuff, and it's just, I mean, it's just bizarre. But it's scary to the extent that I mean, Twitter's not real, and I think the particularly the DCCC elections showed us that there are still left-leaning / progressive folks that are voting. But there are large numbers of folks that are buying into this trash, and yeah. But
Yeah.
that's a long-winded way of saying I think people are benefiting financially, politically from doing this.
Yeah, what I understand too, it's that's a big part of what the techies, network state groups, they go after the new residents that don't know what's going on, and they have a very surface understanding of what's going on, and those are the people they can be like, oh well, it's crime and we need more cops. Look, these progressives don't know what they're doing. Which, you know, what progressives are in politics right now? Like, who is actually progressive and making a difference now? But you did bring up something about gangs, and that reminds me to so Mayor Tao is bringing back ceasefire to address quote unquote crime issues. Do you think that's going to help?
So ceasefire is a two-pronged program, right? Carrot and stick. Um, and what we saw during, well, we're still in the pandemic, but when we saw, during the first couple of years of the pandemic, was the loss of all of the carrot. So we lost the mentorship, we lost the social service programs, we lost the violence interrupters, we lost the counseling groups, we lost the mentoring, we lost the job training. Like all of those things that actually can help people shift their lives, heal from trauma, become more productively engaged in our community. All of that went away. So as long as those are the things, like when we talk about bringing back ceasefire, if we're talking about bringing back that stuff, absolutely, I think we'll see some changes. If we continue to only rely on the stick, I mean, the VCOC was a disaster. Even I can say that. It was just a disaster. It was bad policing policy. And it definitely contributed to some of the stuff. But also before VCOC, right, the ceasefire was falling apart with just stick. So, and I hope that, and one of the things I know is that some of the organizations that provide the carrot parts of ceasefire, when at the height of ceasefire, when it was so-called successful, they weren't coming out to be part of the press conferences because they couldn't be associated with the cops. Which also meant that they weren't getting credit for all of the murders they prevented from happening in the first place.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's so strange too. Like, why do we always run into this system where, everything has to be punishment? The only things taxes want to pay for is to punish people and not support or help them. I mean,
We're
it's just
addicted to it. We are addicted to vengeance in this country. Addicted.
yeah, it's so weird. What is this bloodlust about? And like, why? I mean, you could see it international. I mean, maybe it's like a kind of human thing, but it's hopefully it would be something we could evolve away from.
One would think, but apparently not.
Yeah, exactly. So getting back to the Doomloop narrative, I want to talk about the In-N-Out Burger closing
Oh my
because
God.
I know for some reason it's been made this massive story, and especially because they come at it with, oh, we have to close because of crime, but then at the same time you're seeing footage of the Panda Express that's literally in the same parking lot, totally packed. Everyone's coming in, especially during, like lunch and dinner. It's totally packed. So, for one, do you know what the real story is about In-N-Out Burger? And two, uh, does anyone do the streets actually care?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the extra story about In-N-Out. I have a question, similar to the question you were asking me about who benefits from the doom loop. I'm trying to figure out what the fiscal incentive is for some of these companies to say that they're leaving because of crime. There's something I can feel like there's something there. What I do know is that we do not live in a pre-COVID world. What I do know is that we had almost 3 years of people not leaving their homes that businesses haven't recovered from. When people want to talk about how downtown is deserted now and it's because of all this crime. No, downtown Oakland is deserted now at lunchtime because we're all working from home, actually.
Yeah.
And do I think that cities, not just Oakland, right, have done a horrible job at mitigating the impacts of the economic pandemic, of trying to figure out how you generate revenue inside of a city where everyone is working at home and you can't even charge some of the same taxes that you used to be able to charge when everybody was in an office space? We've done a horrible job of that, right? We've done a horrible job of helping businesses and communities, quite frankly, like all of us, bounce back and or not, I can't even say bounce back because we're still in the middle of pandemic. Like, what is our new normal? What are the types of investments that we need to make? What needs to be recouped on the back end because city council ignored all of us and didn't invest resources in the front end? What are those things? And I think the failure to do so is what we're seeing, the fallout of right now. I also think, and this is not a defense of Mayor Tom, I also think that it is so disingenuous, absolutely absurd, um, to blame the first year of this woman's term, to have her be responsible for the 8 years of wreckage that Libby Schaaf engaged in while she was mayor, which included the largest explosion of the unhoused population in the history of this city, which included not really generating any new revenues or taxes for the city, which included continuous and nonstop increasing of funding for the Oakland Police Department, not checking their overtime hours. We paid millions of dollars out in settlements, which included only building 4% of what she was supposed to build of low cost, no cost housing. The bloodiest year in the last 10 years for Oakland was 2021. Period. Facts in a discussion.
Wow.
Armstrong was chief and Libby was mayor. So what is actually happening here? Right? And that's what I was saying earlier. It's just so disingenuous. And if these people really loved Oakland, right? If this is really about Oakland love, foundational Oakland love, um, they wouldn't be attempting to manipulate the hearts, minds, and realities of Oaklanders to push forward a political agenda that is not going to help, but rather really, really harm the majority of Black and brown Oaklanders that live in the flats of this city.
Totally. Yes. I'm glad you brought up Libby Schaaf because I am interested because you ran against her in 2020. Was what what
No,
inspired you?
2018.
Oh,
2018.
2018. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
2018.
But what I mean, what inspired you to do that? Was she would just made you that angry that you're just like, I time to step up.
I mean, she did really make me that angry. But that's even when I think about the vitriol right now. I mean, it's no secret that I would go for Libby's jugular all the time. But it was from political facts and reality, right? And connecting her choices to impacts. I actually never had any desire to run for office. I actually think that anybody that wakes up is like, I should be like, we need to check there's something wrong with that
Very true.
person. I was asked by the community, I mean, like from labor, from our families, from different community groups, from education sector, faith leaders, to run. And I'm again political conditions, right? That was actually, we were in this place where the neoliberal establishment was really trying to pull Oakland to the right, and there weren't any real progressives in the race, which was going to allow, Libby Schaaf to run with this narrative that she was a progressive.
Mhm.
And should that narrative go unchecked, we saw, right, the fallout in terms of what types of policies or practices would come with the next stage of her administration as being really problematic. And so when we first decided, and I say we because it was the People's Campaign, it was not about Cab Brooks, it was really People's Campaign. I built our platform together through a series of town halls. Um, uh, was really about just ensuring that we were having a real conversation about the difference between progressive and neoliberal, that we were having a real conversation about the unhoused, we were having a real conversation about public safety, right? Like forcing things to push to the left. And we were successful at that. And for a while, like, we never expected to get the seat. And then there was this moment where I think all, a lot, the voting base of folks that pay attention to the election, that we all collectively inhaled, because it became very clear that it was a race between me and Libby.
Yes.
And we lost, but I'm glad for that. But I'm also really impressed. Like, I had never run for office. She was an incumbent. We took 43% of the first place votes. Right. And then funneled that energy into actual organizing, and ultimately, right, the electoral work. So we do have, I think, the only remaining progressive in electoral politics sitting on city council right now, and that's council member 5.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, getting second is amazing, against an incumbent. But I also too, I do love how you say that you're kind of glad that you didn't win because I mean, for one, do you think you would have been recalled, or at least like a
Oh yeah.
recall campaign would have started?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If they, I was either going to be recalled or assassinated.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, I just, I was going to go in and do everything I possibly could. And I was clear about that, the limitations of that, but everything I possibly could to push the types of agendas that I think build healthy and thriving communities, right? Like
Mhm.
open, if your building is sitting there and it's empty, I'm putting unhoused people in it. Like that's what we're doing, because the answer to homelessness is housing people.
Yes.
I'd spent a lot of time studying the mechanisms of how OPD gets this unchecked overtime. Like the first directive to the city administrator was going to be about reining that in.
Mhm.
So like I had a first 30 days plan, and if I made it past 30 days, then who know what. But I also see I see what's happening and not just to Councilmember Fife, but like to actual progressive that have refused to be moved, across the country. How painful that is, how difficult it is to get stuff done. I think just in general with electoral politics, you do have to make some sort of compromises. I'm not built like that. And I think that I am much more effective, and we've been able to do much more work on this side of those halls of power than I would have been able to do on the inside. And I like to say what I want about who I want, how I want, particularly if it's part of my organizing strategy.
It's hard hard to be political when you don't want to check yourself.
I don't, I shoot straight from the hip. I don't play games. And what's right is, my mother would say, it's always black and white with you. And I'd be like, no, it's right and wrong, right?
Yes.
It's either right or it's wrong. And
Yes.
that's it.
I'm right there with you.
I'm a Scorpio. What can I say?
I'm a Virgo, so everything's got to be right. But and that you bring up police overtime, which I do really want to. I mean, it's kind of common across the nation that the police exploit overtime pay, but in Oakland, I had never seen anything like it. I actually, as a journalist, I used to go on ride-alongs, and
Uh-huh.
which was interesting. I mean, you really get to know and see what's going on, and it really, like, they want to show like, oh, we're doing a lot and everything, but no, they just drive around, they talk, they'll take breaks, they'll eat Taco Bell, they just do whatever they want, but they
Right.
will still rack up so much overtime in the summers. A police officer I did a ride along with said that officers will work between 100 and 200 hours. And it's just because they know they can just rack up that overtime,
Yeah.
and it's so much. I mean, if you were mayor, would that been one of the first things you put in
Yeah.
check?
No, that it was it. And like I said, I spent a lot of time studying how they do it. Like one of the major, see if I remember this correctly, but at shift change, right? So at shift change, right? You've reached your 8 hours or whatever, you're supposed to go off shift, and the new shift of cops come in. They will be headed to the station and either will pull somebody over for nothing,
Hmm.
because once you're past that hourly, right, then you get to start charging time and a half.
Hmm.
Or there's a call, right? Somebody radios in that they pulled somebody over, and four cops that were supposed to do shift change go there and hang out for 2 hours. And there's an overtime, like stuff like that. And because they don't need their immediate commander's permission to do that, they
Hmm.
just go do it. So, like, a really simple thing that the city could do right now is institute that they've got to get permission,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
institute metrics for if you were allowed to make a self-determined decision to not go clock out when you're supposed to, i.e., a routine traffic stop is not a reason for you to rack up another 4 hours of taxpayer dollars.
Oh,
Like stuff like that could be done right now.
yeah,
Right
yeah.
now.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't know how many times I've seen that where you got the one cop and a car pulled over, and then four others just hanging out. Like, you could tell they're just bullshitting. You could
Yeah,
tell they're just hanging out. It's
yeah,
like they might as well be at the bar.
that part.
Exactly. um, so now there's two recalls going on. There's against Mayor Sheng Tao, and the district attorney, Pamela Price, which started 6 months after she came into office, which is just
It
So mind
started, I'm
blowing.
sorry, no, it started before the votes were tallied for both.
Oh, wow.
The calls for recall were happening for both of these women while votes were still being counted. The narrative was, if they get elected, we will just recall them.
God, yeah.
That should make everybody's head explode, right? Like, again, it's absurd, it's disingenuous, it's not about public safety, it's not even about bettering Oakland. This is about political power and proximity to it. Um, that's it. That's
Yeah.
that's it, that's all. And again, with the racist tropes, like if I see one more white person call her Auntie Pam, like I'm just not gonna be my best self to this point. Like it's just, and then watching black faces stand by and allow that to happen
Mhm.
is even more gross. Um, even with Shane, like the racism
Mhm.
and bigotry, and then the misogyny across both, like it's just, and the misinformation, disinformation, right? Like I wish kind of that it was true that Pamela wasn't sending anybody to prison, but that's just not true.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
actually just not true, right? She's making data-driven public safety decisions like, hey, sending 60-year-olds to prison for the rest of their lives actually doesn't do shit to
Yes.
make our communities any safer. There's actually all this data that shows that longer prison sentences do not do anything to make us safer.
Mm.
Um, and that the vast majority of people are coming home, even the lifers come home. So who do you want to come home? Right? Do you want someone that was afforded the resources to work on their trauma and given job trainings and psychological and emotional and support, then come back and be a productive member of your community? Or do you want someone that went and sat in solitary for 24 years because they were being punished for this decision they made when they were 15?
Mhm. Mhm.
I know who I want in my community.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's data-driven decision making. It's more equitable probably than it's ever been. I'm not gonna say it's all the way equitable because there's still the vast majority of black and brown folks that are being run through those systems, and people are enraged about actually trying to make the system work.
Yeah, I really don't understand the motivations for Price's recall too, because it doesn't seem like she's doing. I mean, what crime went up under O'Malley, and crime is going down under Price, and it
Yep.
I don't see anything egregious. It just seems like there's a whole group of people that just want somebody cruel in that position that doesn't see humanity.
Yeah, but even that, I think, so I first met Brenda Grisham as an actress. She and for folks, I'm guessing people are listening to this know this, but I'll just say, so Brenda Grisham is one of the leading faces for both the Price and now Tao recall. She shows up at that all of that stuff. But her son, Christopher Lavelle Jones, who was a musical prodigy, was gunned down on their doorstep. By a hail of bullets, trying to go rescue his baby sister in the car. They were headed to church.
Terrible.
I mean, god awful, like just god awful. And I met her first as an actress because she and some other mothers both who had lost their loved ones to street violence and state violence had come together to write this play. And I played Brenda actually. And part of the journey of the production was site specific performance. So it means that I stood on her front porch where Christopher's blood is still stained, this house that she still lives in, that
Wow.
she walks over every single day, and did this piece. And you grow, you connect with folks. And so I hold that even in this political moment, which is very tiresome. And I I I can't say I understand because I can't understand losing my I I I I say all the time, like, I have so much respect for the families that we work for, and I'm just in awe of them, because if anything ever happened to my daughter, I I would be done.
Yeah.
Um,
I have
and
that
so,
nightmare all the
you
time and
know
think about the revenge there
you're right,
fantasy.
yeah, like, I wouldn't be anyway.
Yeah.
So I understand some of it with her and the families that she's organizing from a guttural place. and the false belief that somehow, and Brenda's case has never been solved. Like, let's just, the police have never caught the folks who murdered her child. So I understand, again, the way we are indoctrinated to believe, right, that somehow prison is justice, that's going to make us feel better. When you talk to, I mean, there's other types of victims' rights organizations who actually are really clear that locking this other person up forever is not going to bring my person back. I came to being an abolitionist when I realized that the man who sexually assaulted me when I was a child, like him sitting in a cage, actually wasn't going to make me feel any better. Right, that was work that I had to do, and I wanted to know how he got to be that way, and I wanted to interrupt that cycle. Right, that's what I wanted to stop. So, and so in some ways, I feel like, and Brenda, this will really piss her off. She hears this, I know, because of the way I know that she sees herself. She and these families are being manipulated too. Right, they are being manipulated as well. And yeah, everything was worse under O'Malley. Everything. And it's also not the district attorney's job to create safe conditions on our streets, actually. Like, that's just sort of, that's not in the job description, right? That is the job of the city council and the police department and the mayor. And I would say, all of us. And I would say all of us first, because we can do it better. The DA gets what happens, right? What ends up rolling through her part of the criminal legal system is what happens when everybody else fails at their job. So it's misplaced anger. It's disingenuous. And I believe the people that are driving the recall know it's disingenuous. And again, I mean, you look across the country, you look at Krasner, Pam, you see what happened to Boudin, all over the country, left-leaning DAs, Gascon. I feel a way about Gascon. He was DA when SFPD, along with the OPD in 2015, run a killing spree, and nobody he never stood up for our families ever. To me, he's no better than Kamala Harris. I would actually consider Gascon establishment. I mean, me and Melina Abdullah, Black BLM Los Angeles, we used to go back and forth, right? When they were like running him, and I was like, "Yo, but he did this." She was like, "Yo, but it's not." And I can't remember the sister that they protested every week for like 5 years, who was the DA in LA before that. I'm babbling at this point, but it's just, it is not going to make it, and both of these recalls are going to cost us millions of dollars and destabilize. So let's say that they're successful, then we're back at ground zero with newbies in both of these offices who are still going to require the same year and a half to get up and running. So then you're just going to destabilize the city even more. It doesn't make any sense. It makes dollars for somebody, but it does not make sense for us.
Nope. No. But at least, I mean, you're on the ground. You're seeing what's going on. The recalls this time, it seems different than San Francisco. It seems like the people aren't reacting. Am I correct in my observation? Does it seem like people are seeing through this BS?
Yeah, I mean, you see, they're hella active. They're hella active on Twitter. But when it comes to actual rallies, right? Like, so that same person whose name we don't say, like, he loves to put forth this claim, like, the number one supporter of the Shang recall are Black women. Well, the people that come out to those rallies are old, and I do mean old white women. Old Black men. White men, excuse me. All white men, right? And it's no joke. A couple of them really do be wearing MAGA hats as they're strolling through these rallies. It's so no. I actually don't think that there is the support. I mean, there's no such thing as an elected official or even a public figure that everybody likes. Right? Like, there are going to be people that hate Mayor Tao. There are going to be people that hate Pamela Price. There are plenty of people that hate me. Plenty of people that hate Carol Fife, Councilmember Fife. But there are also just as many, if not more, people that love those folks. Right?
Yeah.
And that's why, like, I was so eager for the March 5th elections to happen, because I was saying to my comrades and my colleagues, I was like, that's going to tell us. That's going to give us a really good barometer for actually who is still active in the political sphere in Oakland. So it's not a surprise that Jennifer Epstein lost to Miley, given how long he's been on the Board of Supervisors. But if you look at, she got 36% of the vote.
Mhm.
And she doesn't even have a base, right? She wasn't even a public figure when she started. That is a huge deal. Nikki Bass triumphed over all
Yeah.
those folks.
Kick some
If,
ass.
kick some ass. If you look at the DCCC, Pamela Price still was able to garner right neck and neck with Lauren Taylor, like that, and no slate was able to claim a majority of those seats, right? And that's a body that half the voters don't even know what the hell they do or pay attention. So I think that as organizers, as folks that are concerned with the political ecosphere of Oakland, I think we hold on to that and we organize from that place and we pull ourselves out of the doom loop of Twitter.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that is such a great point, because the right wing moderates or centrist use these special elections because they have low turnout and they can kind of get the outcomes they want. Hence, the recalls in San Francisco were both special elections,
Right.
outside of everything. So that you're totally right. If they're blocking even on the special elections, that is a great sign.
Yeah.
So that's something to give you hope.
Yeah.
But with the doom loop narrative and stuff, if that didn't exist, I mean, beyond just bad policing and the carceral state, what does Oakland really need in your mind?
Oh, there's so much. We need an infusion of resources. We need um, new taxes that don't fall on the shoulders of Oaklanders. We need new business taxes. We need to figure out how we're going to reinvigorate our business economy, downtown, community spaces and places inside of this new reality. What do those recovery programs look like? We need to divest some millions from the Oakland Police Department and invest it in things that actually keep us safe, like low cost, no cost housing, like mental health and trauma supports, like non carceral response to community crisis, like job training for living wage jobs, bring in businesses that are willing to hire Black and brown folks, even if they're coming home from prison, especially if they're coming home from prison, and pay them a living wage job. We need investment down the Hagenberger corridor. We need like that. Actually, there was a dude who ran in 2018 with me and Pamela, Marshawn, and that was actually the one piece of his platform where I was like, that actually would make sense, right? And had I won, like he had this whole idea about the revitalization of the Hagenberger corridor, and I think he's absolutely right. In terms of reinvestment, we need to make businesses pay their fair share. We need real community benefit agreements. We need massive investment in the art and artists, right? They capitalize off of us and our work in order to attract people here. But I know so many Black artists that have had to leave, that cannot afford to live here now that the people have come because of their art.
Yeah.
We need the left to get its shit together and stop fighting over scraps and unify over a political social justice service agenda to the people. We need to fix our damn potholes. And I know that sound like no, but for real,
Yeah.
it's so demoralizing.
Yeah.
Like right, it is so demoralizing. And you just know, like every 3 months, right? You bet. Now I'm privileged enough that I can afford to pay for a new tire. You just think about that. Like it's just we need to interrupt the. And part of what I mean by the left needs to get its shit together, like it can't just be APTP and Cat Brooks going, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's right. Like we need to the same way that they've created an echo chamber of bullshit. We need an echo chamber of the facts.
Yes.
The other thing that we lost during COVID was our ability to be on the doors, right? To be physically engaging with people. We need to
Yeah.
get back on the streets and on these doors. And we need to be base building. Organizing gets the goods every single time. That has been true as long as organizing has existed, and it will always be true for as long as humanity exists. And so, all of those things we need to do. But really, we need to, like I said earlier, I'm a Scorpio. We need to finish them.
Yeah.
But November 9th, I want to wake up and be like, oh, great, they're all gone. Bias.
Well, hopefully we get people on the streets and make that a reality. Awesome. Well, this has been great, Kat. I really appreciate you taking the time. Now,
Thank you.
one thing I failed to mention is that you have your own radio show on KPFA. If you could expand on that, tell people where to go and listen to it. That'd be great.
Sure, thanks. So, yeah, I host a show called Law and Disorder on KPFA 94.1 FM. You can stream it at kpfa.org. We are Monday through Thursdays from 8 to 9 a.m., and you can learn more at kpfa.org.
I will put a link to that in the comments of the
Thanks,
show.
Kevin.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks again. This has been
My
great.
pleasure. Yeah, this
I
is
hope you
great.
have a wonderful day,
You
and
too.
I hope we can talk again.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You have my info now. All
You
right.
got it.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wasn't that a great interview? Make sure to check out Kat's show on KPFA. The link is below. Before I go, I have two more things. One is that I missed the news that Kat's organization, the Anti-Police Terror Project, called for an independent investigation into the firing of 2 internal affairs officers in the Oakland Police Department. According to the East Bay Times, they were fired and others will be disciplined for failing to hold OPD officer Fong Tran accountable for engaging in illegal behavior in order to achieve the convictions of 2 innocent men for murder. So the Oakland Police Department has been under a federal consent decree, aka a government-appointed babysitter, since 2003 because of corruption like this. It started after the violent renegade police patrol The Riders was busted, and it continues to be needed because of officers like Tran. I should also note that the 2 officers who were fired were Mega Lee, the lead internal affairs investigator, and Drennan Lindsay, the OPD deputy chief in charge of investigations, and former police chief LeRon Armstrong's wife. I'll keep tabs on this and update you when I learn more. Finally, to wrap up, I want to return to someone I talked about back in episode 1. Remember Lee Edwards, the VC dork that said that progressives actually won this past election because people like former APAC lobbyist Trevor Chandler won a spot on San Francisco's Democratic County Central Committee? Well, Edwards was also one of these social media attack dogs for the techie centrists, and he just exposed himself as the tyrant he actually is. He recently posted on Twitter that he thought the murderous dictator of Chile, General Augusto Pinochet, did one cool thing ever. He tossed communists from helicopters. While Edwards was right to call Pinochet's reign brutal fascism, his throwaway comment about communists being brutally murdered should haunt him for the rest of his life. To note, it wasn't just communists that Pinochet killed and threw out of the helicopters, it was any dissident, and he killed tens of thousands of them. This included folks like Victor Jara, known as the Bob Dylan of South America, who had his hands broken and was made to play guitar before soldiers shot him 44 times. Edwards' tweet is another example of how bloodthirsty and messed up these centrist techies are. Who thinks that brutally killing someone over their political beliefs is okay? Well, psychos like Edwards do. We should tell you everything about the kind of people who want to take over your city. Remember, you might be the next one in their crosshairs. If you're interested in learning more about Pinochet and why Edwards' tweet was so messed up, Gil Duran published a great piece on his Substack, Parallel Mirror, which I will link in the comments below. And that's it for this episode of the Doomloop Dispatch. Please like and subscribe to the show on YouTube or leave me a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, though my Insta account is restricted for some reason. And I just hate social media. Anyways, I hope to see you next week. And until then, keep fighting the good fight.